Good morning, everyone. How are you today? We are here with Joanne Molesky. Joanne, how are you?
Pretty good, thanks.
Fantastic. Where are you right now?
I'm on Vancouver Island, which is on the west coast of Canada.
First conference, most importantly, is not a conference just about software development and agile. This year, it's about organizational agility. So it's designed in a way to try and empower attendees to discover and discuss the fundamental issues and opportunities that you face when you're trying to adopt new ways of working, or that come as a result of adopting new ways of working. This can mean software. This can mean any other part of your business, and that's kind of the whole pretense of the talk. Of the conference. Australia is in a very interesting position over here because we, our economy has grown for the most part through natural resources, and slowly it's trying to evolve into a more innovative culture. Have you seen much? You lived here for 2.5 years, so you'd have observations on the Australian market. How would you compare it to, say, over in Canada or any other markets you've seen as well, both in terms of maturity and I guess like the maturity of the thinking of the workforce?
Well, okay, so Australians are kind of like Canadians in the values. I found them very close in similarities, but when we get into the States and continental Europe, the EU, it's much different. First of all, a lot more competition, right? The organizations tend to be a lot bigger. Now, I know that there's some Australian organizations that are quite large, but in relative numbers, very few, right? And some of them that are large, it's an Australian subsidiary of a larger global company. And the physical isolation is important as well.
Very true.
It's kind of like when I was living in Australia, I used to call it's kind of like being in bubblicious world. Whereas I'm living in a bubble, and you could be a very big fish in a little pond in Australia. But the thing is, what I found out about Australians in particular is they're very open to new ways of working and new ideas, because I think, it's a little more predictable within that enclosed environment.
Very true.
Whereas in this, the rest of the world, and watch out for China, it's like the unpredictability scares the bejeebers out of people. And what they try to do in large organizations, well, I'm gonna lock things down more so I can control it more. And you can't control unpredictability in today's world. It's too complex. And I don't know if you've seen the video about a pendulum, how a pendulum swings back and forth on one pivot point. You add another pivot point to it, like the arm, all of a sudden, the outcome of here, it can go anywhere, right? Like the range of motion and the way things can move and the unpredictability of that movement becomes great. So think about what happens in markets, where if you add another factor into the market, or even technology, you add another factor into the technology, the unpredictability increases like exponentially, and you can't control that. You can't lock everything down, because what happens is if you try to do that, you say, okay, it's just going to go here, 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 and nowhere else. You limit yourself, and you'll get the markets coming in and saying, oh, that space, there's only one player there, I'm going to take over. And they're more adaptive than you are, so they can figure it out.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I guess when there's a form of ambiguity, that tends to put people into a state of fear. And when there's fear, you go into your natural behaviors and you shut down and you try and take control rather than letting it go. And I guess that would probably be one of the root problems. So from your understanding of the Australian market, I guess, where do the opportunities sit then for people? And what are some of the ideas that you're looking to maybe bring over when you come over and you speak to this audience? Because I think you're right. I think in an enclosed community, there is a lot of opportunity, but at the same time, it becomes a little bit harder to shake it loose without any major disruptors. And our primary employers have sat fairly steady over recent years, and they're all trying to make shifts. So I'm really interested to know your opinion subjectively to us and our audience.
Well, I think that enclosed environment is the real advantage. Your customer base. Now, the other thing is it's that value, the system of Australians to be open and be fairly, I would say, blunt, but you'll talk about things that are that other cultures find difficult to talk to. And one is the organization structure, right? So that gives you a chance to experiment. And because you're small, you know, the risk that you can create smaller experiments, so it's less risky than trying a big global experiment, for example. And, you know, the thing about Australian markets is that it is restricted, it's limited in size. And if you get that adaptability correct, you know, within your organizational structure, you get this ability to adapt, that gives the opportunity to have growth outside of Australia. Right? So you would be further ahead, say, than, you know, another organization with similar services in another part of the world, you know, if you chose to go that route. The competition, you know, fewer competitors, it's easier to know what they're doing, where they're coming from. And, you know, so the predictability, the unpredictability actually decreases. So you have a little bit of control there. And those are the advantages. But I think it's mostly the culture of Australians and the organizations that actually helps and would be to use the advantage. And you know your audience, right? You know your customers. A little bit more difficult when you're talking about multiple cultures in a global organization.
Yeah, I'd never actually thought of it that way, actually. And so as an individual, imagine I'm working, say, in one of these big conglomerates, maybe one of the big banks or one of the big telcos here, and everyone's talking about, say, agile and how they're changing their agile ways of working. Where does the opportunity sit, and what are the things to look out for?
Well, you know, lots of opportunities that can go on ad nauseum, but you know, unlock the potential of the humans within the organization, right? That is your biggest challenge, you know, and learning to recognize that, yeah, you're wrong most of the time and accept that. So most organizations, and this is a quote that Barry had when we were talking once in an interview, it was, you know, most organizations would rather be wrong and deliberately wrong than to admit that they don't know.
Yeah, I just read that actually.
And you kind of go, that is mind-blowing. And the fact that, you know, they don't take this risk-based approach to how they do their business. So and think about the business as a risk on a broader perspective in the use of technology or how we're going to shift the way we work is, you know, it's usually like, oh, we're going to go through a big transformation and everything, you know, we'll train everybody up and we'll get people certified and whatever it is. And then all will be better. Or we'll buy a new system that will wrap around all their old systems and just make it easier for everybody to get the information. You know, that's something I saw in Australia. And that doesn't work because it still fails to acknowledge the human potential. And it fails to unlock the human potential by admitting that we can't know everything today. It's highly likely that our ideas and you know, our predictions are wrong, will not happen. And, you know, just working through how do you unlock that as well, allowing people to experiment very small, very low risk. And, you know, I talk about, you don't have to turn the whole organization into agile overnight, right? Or to be agile.
Whatever it is.
Transformation is something that's going to happen over time, but what helps it occur is the culture and our attitude towards the value of the people within the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really powerful way to look at it, particularly just unlocking the value of your workforce. I think that's what it really comes down to it, and looking at your people is your greatest resource. So what can people look forward to hearing you talk about on the day, if you've thought about it yet, or some of the ideas?
Well, I think just a general overview of our experience of, you know, yes, we're technologists and technology is a great thing, but it's going to take more than technology. It's going to take more than a transformation program. This is about developing a culture of learning and how you do that. What are the common pitfalls to avoid? And what are some of the things that we have observed in our practice that are successful? And of course, that trying to get people to recognize that, get over yourself. You're not right all the time. And you can't be. So don't try to be, So the way to, and I've tried to do this in my life and my career, is everybody says, well, what were your plans to get to where you are today? And I said, you know what? I had a vague idea that, these are the things I wanted to achieve. I wanted to grow. I wanted to continue to learn. I want to be happy in my work because it consumes a great deal of my life. And I want to be proud of what I do, right? So with these values, right, I said, you go back to them each and every time to say, is what I'm doing today going to get me to there?
Yeah, absolutely.
and as an organization, you need to do the same thing, and you need to get everybody on that same page. So it involves blowing up a lot of the management processes and practices that are in place today and accepted as the way to do things. And really, it's just status quo. It's the way everybody does it. But is it the best way? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Because what's good for one organization is not necessarily good for another. And the thing is that we have to train ourselves to, observe, orient, and adjust.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think I said that to you in my email to you actually.
Yeah.
A lot of companies are just trying to find these cookie cutter solutions online. They're very academic, and they don't actually talk enough about making it work for you, and that has to happen over time, doesn't it? So.
Well, yeah, and the thing about a solution, a model, a framework, whatever you want to call it, the stuff that we teach in business schools, they're all good.
Yeah.
Like I can't really say one is bad in and of himself. What is wrong is that when we try to take those models and say, we're going to follow it exactly. We're going to follow this framework, whether, whatever framework it is, because somebody said that's the way it's supposed to be done.
Yeah.
And I go, well, no, actually, most of those frameworks and models, even when you get into controls on around use of technology, it's about, there's an intent behind those. What is it you're trying to achieve? And then you take what works from those models, and maybe the model doesn't work at all because your organization is completely different, and use that to learn. And then you learn and adjust, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing, there's a famous quote from one of the Toyota founders where, they started out manufacturing looms for textiles.
Yeah.
And somebody had sold the plans of their looms to a competitor, and everybody was really upset about it. And the owner said, actually, well, no, I'm not that concerned about it because I can't stop people from figuring out what we're doing today. But the thing is, they will build those and it may move them forward a bit. And we see this, with all the different transformation programs. We've got this new transformation program. We're going to put it in place. And you get this little uptake in performance as a result. But then everything slides back to status quo because we haven't changed that culture to one of learning and acknowledging the necessity to constantly adjust and reach for perfection. Knowing that we'll never achieve it, because what's perfection today for our organization is not going to be what's perfection tomorrow.
Yeah. And you actually talk about that example in the early chapters of the book Lean Enterprise, don't you? So I think it's a really good one, and I think the whole concept of a learning culture. So how can people prepare themselves? So if we're thinking to both before the conference, but is there outside of your own content, I guess, and including, what can people be reading? Is there anything that you tend to find that if they read this, or if they learn this, or if they try and think that way, that's the domino that falls first. It starts to make everything else easier.
Yeah, I think that the work that and we talk about it briefly in our book, the OODA loop, observe, orient. I can't remember, D is and A is adapt.
Yeah.
But that changing your mindset to how do I deal with changing environments and not like how can I control the environment I'm in today.
Okay.
It's a subtle difference, and so a lot of the lean enterprise institute the Lean Institute has a lot of information on that. Definitely the stuff on Beyond Budgeting. The Beyond Budgeting Institute has a lot of white papers, and there's a lot of free stuff available. But it's that constant, how do I get faster feedback on what I'm doing, what our teams are doing? Is it bringing value? There's some books around measurement, but I really recommend the Douglas Hubbard book, How to Measure Everything.
I've heard of that book actually.
Yeah, and I mean, to be honest, I haven't read all of it, but there's some really good nuggets, particularly in first 2 or 3 chapters about how you think about measurement. What is it you're measuring?
Yeah.
Is it true value? And how if it's something I think is intangible, like he actually says everything's measurable. If it's important, you can measure it. And his idea of measurement, when he defines a measure, he says something you do to reduce the risk associated with things you don't know about.
Wow.
And so,
that's awesome.
You kind of it kind of blows your mind. So you think, everybody asks us about measures these days. This is the latest thing, when we go into consulting. What should we be measuring? Can you tell us what we should be measuring? And I'm going, you know what? It changes because you identify what's your burning fire today that you have to put out. How often are you dealing with that? What is a measure you could do to help you find out information about why that's occurring and how you can make it better? And I always say, I talk about, I usually end my talks, and maybe I'll do it again this time, but Jesse Robbins was the master of disaster for Amazon. So Chaos Monkey, right? And all of their data centers. And he always says, don't fight stupid, make more awesome.
Yeah.
So just, stop. If you're frustrated at work and you just find you're fighting all the time, is you have that mind shift about how can I make it better? What can I do to make it better? Is there somebody else there who's willing to help me to make it better? Yeah.
And I guess that comes back to the kind of the psychological safety piece as well. You need to feel comfortable to put your hand up and ask for help. So
yes, and so talk a little bit about organizations, cultures, and as managers, particularly, we call them the missing middle. We talk a lot about that, where you have a groundswell of employees who want to work in a certain way, know that there's a problem and want to do something about it. There's executives feel the same way, conceptually get the ideas, and all that management that's in between that behaves completely different because the incentives are not there for them to change.
Yeah. And I guess the behaviours have never been reinforced to let go of control through education and school, through to the workforce, through probably their personal lives and what's socially reinforced as well. So it's hard to fight that trend when it comes down to it. So I managed to scribble a couple of notes while we were talking, and I really, really enjoyed this conversation. But I guess the really powerful thing is that the opportunity for organizations actually sits in your ability to unlock the value in your workforce and your greatest resources, your people. We're lucky in Australia because we have a more condensed market, so people are able to probably capitalize on that as an example and get things right here. In terms of other things you were saying so some of the things that you were talking about is your experience, culture of learning, pitfalls and observations of success, that you need to make it work for you. And that's the most important thing. And what have we got last year in terms of reading and what people can do? The OOD loop, which I know what you're talking about, so I'll put it as a link into the video here, but I can't remember exactly what it is either. I'm really interested by the change in mindset from controlling the system to evolving it. I think that's a really interesting one. The Lean Institute, Beyond Budgeting, shortening your feedback loops, and that awesome quote, measurement is something you do to reduce the risk of something you don't know about. I think that's a real nugget from today. So thank you so much for sharing that. Do you have any kind of final passing comments or?
No, just, you kind of go, you make it your own and you make it as best as you can. So I always say, what's in your control? What can you do to contribute? And if you haven't got anything to contribute, step aside and let somebody else do it. If you're not comfortable with taking the charge, then at least don't get in the way.
Yeah. And that's probably the reality of it, isn't it? Awesome. Well, I can't wait for February, first conference, 26th and 27th of Feb here in Melbourne. And I'm really looking forward to catching up with you properly then and looking forward to your talk. And thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to, and thank you. It was great talking to you.
No, it's a pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.